On mic today, we have Laurie Ulster. How are you doing this fine day?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Glad to have you. You are a very, uh, you're a hilarious Twitter personality. You're a talented writer, and you are or were the supervising producer on After Trek. So that's a lot to have on your
Yes.
plate.
Well, thank you for the first two and very accurate for the third.
So the concept of After Trek really just struck me as being very unique because it was a show about a show, and it was something that kind of came about because Star Trek had been on a break for so long that it was like we almost needed somebody to kind of walk us through getting into the Trek for the new millennium. Was that somewhat accurate, or?
I mean, I think a lot of it was due to success of Talking Dead,
Okay.
which they realized that shows with a certain type of fandom, which you would definitely say the fandoms there are pretty similar. We're in an era where people want to dissect things and they want to talk about things. And the company Embassy Row that CBS hired to produce the
Hmm.
show also did Talking Dead. So they had experience with that kind of after show. And I think they just realized, yeah, this is the perfect show for it. It's the right time. They definitely wanted to launch the new Star Trek with a very big splash.
Hmm.
Obviously, we're at big stakes for CBS All Access. And the fact that they decided to do it in New York made me the happiest person in the world when suddenly I found out that it was in New York and they were looking for people. It was like a
Fantastic.
fantasy. It was an absolute fantasy to hear, like, wow, they actually need people to work on the show. And then a
Uh-huh.
friend of mine was working at Embassy Row, my best friend, and she knew the executive producer, Jeremy Hutchins, who was looking for people and set me up on an email with him.
That's fortune, it's fate, whatever you want to call it.
Oh,
I I'd asked you to send me a couple pictures to use for the video portion of the podcast, and the one of you meditating in front of the Starfleet Command logo, it hits me right in the feels because were that me, that's literally the exact pose I would be making. And I think,
that
go ahead.
well that set visit had nothing to do with After Trek. That was before After Trek. That was
Sure.
just luck of mine that a great friend of mine, Kevin Lafferty, who worked briefly, he worked a while at the beginning, and they had a lot of shifts. He ended up staying, but he booked me. He brought me, and I signed the NDA. I put my phone away, like everything I was supposed to do, and it was before I'd seen anything from the show, and I got to go to the set. And when I saw that, printed on the floor, I just kind of dropped to my knees.
Uh-huh. Yeah, no, it's what almost every one of the people listening to this probably would do themselves, just to feel like. And I've heard of so many people having that moment where it's like the wall between fantasy and reality just gets broken for them. I remember when they first started making Star Wars Episode 1 and Ewan McGregor walked onto the set and saw R2-D2 for the first time. He just lost all sense of composure and just said, oh, the same thing you did, just on his knees.
Right. And it's, they have these various, I haven't been to the Star Trek original series set tour, which is totally on my wish list, and I'm going to do it. But obviously they've taken pieces of it to conventions, and I did the
Hmm.
Starfleet Academy experience. So there's that experience of sitting on the bridge, which we
Hmm.
all have wanted to do for me most of my life. And
Hmm.
that's like a fan experience. But then this was like, it was a brand new show. Nobody had seen it. We knew very little about it.
Uh-huh.
And there I was on these. I mean, the one thing, those sets are absolutely gorgeous, and the
They are.
detail is phenomenal. So that to me, I couldn't believe that I was there. And my friend Kevin, who took me on the tour, we were roommates in I'm at like mid-late 80s. Platonic roommates, as he always tells everybody. I'm like, yes,
Hmm.
it was platonic. But he and I were huge Star Trek fans and still are. And so that it was just for him to get that job and then to invite me there was just, it was a dream come true. And I was very excited. And again, that was long before After Trek, or that was even before I think I was working on TrekMovie. Is that possible? Maybe not. No, it wasn't before that. But But yeah, so all those pieces of it. I mean, for me, it's been from that to After Trek, which was truly the greatest job I ever had in my entire life, and every minute was fantastic. And writing for TrekMovie, like I was a very lonely Trek fan as a kid, and there was no one around me who liked it. And now there's a whole gigantic world of it, and it's amazing.
It really is. The Trek universe in the real world with the fandom has expanded so much. And I mean, between the new productions coming out and the internet bringing us all together, it's like we finally have a way of connecting with each other in ways we haven't before. And for one thing, the convention circuit now is so much bigger than it ever was at any time in the past. We have people planning vacations around Star Trek or any fandom they want. I don't want to just limit it to Star Trek, but it's the one nearest and dearest to my heart, so I'll allow myself to be a little biased there.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing time, and especially like I look back at when I really was like the only one I knew who felt that way about the show, and I was such a weirdo, and there weren't. I mean, this was before there were movies. I mean, I'm old enough to remember all that, and now I look and you can just connect. It's a way of connecting with people, and that like people make fun of any kind of fandom sometimes, but I think it actually gets people to connect, which I think is great, and it's over a shared love of something, even when it degenerates into a shared nitpicking of something. And it's I've made friends through it. It's been phenomenal for me. And gotten paid. I mean, when I was working on After Trek, and I kept laughing, saying, I'm actually being paid well to watch Star Trek. I mean, that was astonishing.
Yes. And that's like the ultimate dream. I had a gig where I managed to cruise around for a bit and get paid to be a fan too. And that is actually a little bit of the goal of this podcast, not directly, but wouldn't mind if it happened that way. And yeah, sure. It's amazing. I didn't get to see the famous Star Trek tour, but there was actually a recreation of the Enterprise Bridge in Oklahoma City where I live that is no longer there.
Oh.
But the moment where the doors open and you see everything and it's like it stops being two-dimensional and starts being your world, if only for just a minute or two.
Right. And you get to pretend for 1 second that you're finally there. I mean, I started watching the original series when I was a kid. So even though I've loved so much of the Trek, almost everything that's come since, and I always find something to like, that original series bridge to me was what I wrote hilariously terrible fan fiction when I was 12. And that's, I pictured myself on that bridge. That was where I wanted to be.
And let me ask you this, and let me see if you felt the same way. You look down at the console with the colored bubbles as buttons and the little painted wood as screens, and you don't doubt it. It is real. It is believable in that moment.
100%.
Absolutely. And you turn around and you look at the captain's chair, and your cheeks flush a little bit, and you look over and your wife says, sit down, you want to.
See, and my husband doesn't come with me on these outings, so that's the big difference, is that I have to go solo or I go with friends. Or when I did the Starfleet Academy experience, which was at the Intrepid in New York, I took my son. So that was the Next Generation bridge. But yeah, I never have, the husband is not a Star Trek guy. He has many fun qualities, but he's missing that one important piece. So he never comes with me and says those things, but he does occasionally buy me things like a lamp for my bedside that looks like the Enterprise bridge.
Ooh, cool.
So there's that.
Well, my wife.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. You're the guest.
No, I would like to hear the story about your wife.
I was going to say, she is a fan, but to different degrees. And that's actually one of the more fun parts, is getting to weigh the different levels of fandom between us. Because sometimes just being more or less a fan brings a different perspective. And that's a lot of fun, too.
Yeah, no, that is fun. I mean, my son's just started to... I mean, he teases me, and he knows that he can get me to like hang out longer if he puts on Star Trek. But I think he's gravitating towards Deep Space Nine these days. but he still thinks Captain Kirk is like the man.
Of course.
So that's good. And he does enjoy some of it, and he talks about some of it with me, but yeah, very, to a much smaller degree. But thanks to TrekMovie, I would say, which I write and edit for and do social and copy edit with a whole team of amazing people. Like I found my community there, and with everything that comes with that, which is covering all these things and doing stories. And then after Trek, I mean, everybody on that show was a fan, and to different degrees, but everybody there was a fan. And so that was fun too, also because we were all, we're watching Discovery. We were getting rough cuts. We were looking at scripts. We were talking to the writers to ask them questions about the choices that they were doing and talking to effects guys. And so that was, there were a couple of us who were very, very hardcore and interested in every single little detail and connecting the dots. And then there were other people that were sort of newer to it and liked some of it, and they were still very joyful about the whole thing. So yeah, it's definitely it went from being this thing that identified me as a weirdo to this thing that has united me with, what's connected me with other people.
You dropped out for a second or so there, but I think we got the gist of it. So just want to give you a heads up.
Oh yeah, it might be my Wi-Fi.
Okay. But I will say that I have to express my appreciation for After Trek, because especially in those dark times between the last episode of Enterprise and the premiere of the 2009 movie, when you really felt like there might never be Trek again, TrekMovie really was one of those things. Like, no, there's hope. There's a glimmer out there. And I've kept reading it ever since then, just because I just enjoy the community. Like you said, it's a great resource. And I think I'm going to put it in the Geek Resources section of the show today.
It's a great site, and I discovered it because I was researching. I didn't know. I mean, I'd given up on there. I wasn't even looking, assuming there was a whole Star Trek world out on the web, which is so funny because I was working in digital. So I was a website director. And I just assumed, well, there's still nothing. Nobody cares about Star Trek but me. There'd been some movies. Everybody sees them and forgets, whatever. And then I was doing research to write about Star Trek Beyond for Fuse, which is where I was working at the time. And every time I was looking something up, I found myself on TrekMovie, and they had the interviews and opinion pieces and all these things and news that I really connected with. And then I just reached out to them and thought, you know what, I'm not being fulfilled by my job. Maybe they need writers. And they wrote back right away and said they couldn't pay writers, but they were looking for enthusiastic writers. And there's always tickets to things and events coverage and swag and who knows what. And that has been the group of people working on that site are phenomenal. They're all just great people. I've met most of them in person now. And that was a huge change for me, because suddenly I got to fulfill all my urges to say everything I want to say about Star Trek and learn more about it with other people doing the same thing.
I'm so glad to hear that. You hear so many horror stories about websites and how they run some things, because, when the money's not flowing, that can bring out the worst in people. So you have a good group of people to work with there is really fortunate, and it's good to know the Trek universe is in good hands.
Yeah, it's a great group of people, really nice, really smart, really invested, really honest, and also just really fun to hang around with, like a very supportive group of people too.
Amazing. So what's been your favorite experience throughout the past, let's say at least since the premiere of Discovery?
I mean, honestly, to me, like as a Star Trek fan, the thing about working on After Trek was, there's the joy like meeting the actors and talking to the producers and creating. I loved creating content for other fans, which I've always wanted to do. But as a writer, which is my aspiration, is to write for television. Mm-hmm. I've written. Scripted, because I've done a lot of I write host copy and I write trivia questions for TV shows and stuff like that. But to be able to and talk with the writers and the producers and about the choices that they made and why they made those choices and where they're headed and what they're hoping to do with the scripts, and then talk to people doing special effects or props or set design about what they were thinking and watching the whole thing come together. It's every book when you're a kid and you get into Star Trek and you read the making of Star Trek and the world of Star Trek and you read all these books about how they make the show. This was actually being there in a way when they're making the show and getting to ask them questions while they're doing it. So to me, that was the most exciting part. And then you get all these little bonuses, like working with Jonathan Frakes a couple of times, which was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he's just, everything that everyone says about him is 100% true. And he gives 100% to whatever he does. I got to go to the season 2 premiere party and do red carpet interviews, and that was for TrekMovie. And all of that was really, I hadn't done red carpet stuff before, and that was really fun. So, I mean, there's so many pieces of it that are just that just fill me with joy and sustain me for the next, while I'm waiting for the next thing to happen, or dealing with the fact that there's no more after Trek, which I am so sad and I'm waiting and hoping, but I don't think they do another one in New York.
Well, might not do it in New York, but if you ever just have the need to just come out and blab about what you think is going on in the Trek universe, you've got my number. We can set something up.
All right.
But in all seriousness, the passion you have for this comes out in your writing on your blog. I love the way you actually managed to go into Futurama and MASH and say, this is, you try to get granular on what they might have meant or what it could mean to the fans watching. It's much more than a surface level BuzzFeed article, for lack of a better description. You actually create real meaningful content for the people reading, and that shows that you care.
Thank you. I mean, those articles, like I don't just to correct, I don't actually have a blog. So what I have is a portfolio of my paid writing.
Oh,
and
okay.
So I used to write a lot for biography for bio.com, and they let me, the editor there, Leanne French, let me really, and Laura Grimm, I got to give credit to both, let me really explore the things that I wanted to write about. And they would say, we need an article on this. And I would be able to come up with some kind of angle. And I'm a trivia person. I love the details. I find them all fascinating. And so I'm a fan of all those things. And some things I would write about and I didn't know about them and I had to pretend. But other things I got to really dig into, find really good facts, talk about them. And then I've written for a lot of sites where they let you do personal essays. And then I end up weaving things in like, Futurama and how it related to my talk with my son when he was young about sex and all different, how everything connects. But I've been very lucky that I've gotten to write about a lot of things that are very important to me. And then when it's not that important to me, I always find a way to connect and find something interesting about it.
I mean, the article you did on Mud's Women, where you're talking about how that affects the way we see relationships and body image, and that was definitely a deep cut in a lot of ways.
And that is the beauty. So another great site. So that was for Women at Warp. And they're a great site. I love what they're doing. And for me, I've written 2 pieces for them because sometimes you just need to say something. And I have to find the right audience. Like TrekMovie isn't the right place for an article like that, I felt.
I would agree.
I didn't think their audience would be particularly interested or receptive. It was burning in my mind for so long, and Women at Warp is a great place, and I've gone there twice now to say things I wanted to say that I knew their audience would connect with, because I'm not trying to stir up controversy. No. I'm trying to connect with people who feel the same way and maybe hopefully articulate something that they felt was unsaid. And that piece to me was very important because I'd been thinking about that issue of the body positivity movement and why I don't connect with it, but struggle with so many of the issues that come up and yet don't connect with it. And then when I rewatched, I can't even remember why I was rewatching that episode because it's not a favorite, but I was, and I realized, it's everything I've been trying to say right here. There it is. So it was perfect, and they were great to accept it and let me explore that with them. And they made really good edits too, I thought.
Awesome. Yeah, I would agree. It's not quite a fit for TrekMovie, but it is. It works in a number of ways. First of all, I've always felt like Harry Mudd is one of those characters that everybody wants to see him in a certain light based on their own experiences, and he's malleable enough that one person's view may not necessarily be right or wrong. And then when we got to the newer incarnation of Mudd, where it's like, okay, maybe he's a bit of a darker character, and the fans kind of get into a conflict like, no, he's just this goofy little clown, and other people are saying, No, he was pretty sinister even from day one.
Yeah, and I actually loved Rainn Wilson's take on him. Like, I thought, I mean, I don't always love when they pull old things and redo it. I haven't been a fan of every choice that they've made, but I actually thought he was great. And my only thing about what I didn't like was that little throwback ending with the going off with Stella after he'd actually tried to murder everybody and ruin the Federation, or Starfleet. So I felt like that ending was like a little throwback nod to the goofy Harry Mudd, and didn't quite feel right to me, but I loved his take on it. And I agree that I thought he was always sinister. I mean, he was always basically willing to have other people suffer for him to get rich or be happy or get the thing that he wanted. But I'll tell you, when we were kids, I Mudd was such a favorite episode for my siblings and me, and we would laugh so hard and be so excited every time it was on. So I connect, I think, to both of those ideas.
Agreed. I mean, at the end, where his worst punishment is when they bring his wife in and she's saying Harcourt, and that is such a goofy, hokey, early 60s sitcom ending that you want to just put a bow on it and put it in that box. But it's like, yeah, but look at what this guy's doing here. He's essentially a merging of a pimp and a pirate. So you can't just completely sanitize that.
Right. And then at the end of the Rainn Wilson, debacle, the Harry Mudd debacle there, like they just send him off with his wife, which you're supposed to feel, is that bad? Is that some sort of torture for him? To me, that was a throwback to the wrong kind of thing.
Agreed.
But I did think that I thought his dialogue was great. I loved his energy. I loved that crazy episode, the magic to make the sanest man go by. I thought it was such a fantastic episode from the show. So, a small thing at the end I didn't love. The rest of it, it was worth it because I just thought I thought it was great, and I loved what he did with his character. I thought it was fascinating.
And sometimes you just have to take the whole package and just acknowledge that there's little pieces that that might not be your cup of tea, but we'll go with the rest of it.
Sure. And then you find someone to complain to and you vent about it for a few minutes, and then everybody feels better.
I have a friend who, I mean, we sit down and we talk about how much we love Star Trek VI, and yet the scene where Sulu is on the bridge and he's yelling for the shields, like says that one line, it's just so over the top. I don't really see that, but it stops the movie for him.
Right. Well, it's funny. I just, I went to see Star Trek the Motion Picture in theaters. Did you go? Were you able to go when they brought it back?
I wasn't able to.
It was a couple of weeks ago. Oh, yeah. Okay. So I hadn't seen it in a theater since the day that it came out, which was a very long time ago. And I went with a good friend, and we were enjoying it. But the close-ups of Sulu with his eyes just getting bigger and bigger and bigger they took you out of it too. Like there were these moments that's just Sulu's eyes are widening. You could almost see the script direction, and it was very silly. And still, you enjoy the whole thing. So yeah, no, I agree with you completely.
Star Trek, the first movie, is not in my pantheon of greats. There's a lot of those moments there for me. So
right.
Yeah, I can definitely see where you're coming from. Again, another friend would always talk about how they artificially made the ship bigger for the movie, where you had to have like a shuttle to get from one end to the other. It's like that made no sense. Like, yeah, but they were just trying to do something different than the show. Again, the logical part of me is saying, yeah, that doesn't make any sense, but I get it.
Yeah, no, and I mean, look, a lot of things don't make sense. I would say in every movie and every series has something that you're just like, okay, that doesn't make any sense. And it's fine. Like you can buy into it, or you can be irritated by that thing and still buy into it. I mean, to me, the Star Trek the Motion Picture was such a huge, to me, that was colossal in my life because, like I said, there was nothing else. And suddenly I still remember being, but my mom's friends took me out of school that day with her permission We
Mm-hmm.
went and lined up first thing in the morning because you couldn't book seats for movies the way you can now.
No.
So we went and lined up in the morning, and all of a sudden there were other people in the line. And suddenly I was in a crowd of people who would stop what they were doing to go line up for a Star Trek movie on a weekday morning. And that alone, even before and with William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy's names on the marquee, that alone was life-changing in terms of what
Yes.
was going on inside my head.
Because you now realize there is a community of people like you who've been invisible to you until now, and now
Yeah.
you're in line with them to have a shared experience.
And we were all so excited, and everybody cheered and laughed at everything that McCoy said, and was so excited when Spock showed up, and all those moments that feel very slow to a modern moviegoer.
Mm-hmm.
I milked them all. You circled the ship 10 more times. I don't care. Just keep circling it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to look at it too. So it was all that. It's to me so connected with my childhood and that moment, and hearing those actors say lines as their characters again. So I will always love that movie forever.
And I'm glad you have that, and that's one of those things that it grounds you as a fan. It becomes part of that experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are you working on these days?
These days I'm doing a lot of writing more than producing, although I'd like to get back into producing. I write a podcast about movies. I do a lot of stuff for TrekMovie. In fact, I was just at Comic-Con in New York covering the Discovery panel, Picard panel, Orville panel, and then the Paley Center Star Trek Discovery. We did red carpet there, and we covered the panel there. So that stuff's always fun. I copy edit on-air captions for pop-up shows on E! and Bravo, which is a funny thing to do. And I don't actually watch those shows, so I do it without the volume on. But I do that. And, trying to figure out what's next. I'm working on a show idea with a couple of friends of mine that we've been working on for a long time with my writing partners. That is for, the parts that I bring to it are definitely influenced by shows like Star Trek and actually Timeless. I don't know if you watch that show. I think it's a great one for Star Trek fans.
I would like to get into it. I haven't had the chance.
I mean, there are only 2 seasons and then a movie, but I thought it was great. So that, and then I have fantasies that there will be some version of After Trek, but I think if they do something, it'll be for the Picard show, and I think if they do it, it'll be in LA, and my heart will break in 2.
Geography is the enemy of fun.
It is, and I have a family here. I have kids and a husband, and so I can't just pick up and go. I mean, that the hours on those shows alone, when I do TV, the hours are very long, and my kids are 12 and almost 16. They have to adjust to that, and they don't love it, but they're used to it.
Sure. It's definitely hard, and I definitely give you credit for being a parent and having a job that is extremely demanding in terms of time, to say nothing of energy.
It is, but the one thing they noticed when I was doing After Trek for sure was that I was just happy all the time. I mean, it was crazy. We filmed on Sundays, so my days off were Friday and Saturday. So I lost one day with the family, but I was also around on the Friday, which I think they liked when they came home from school. But that, just the happiness every day. We made tribbles today. I'd come home and bring stuff home or show them hilarious pictures or tell them who I met, and I would be bursting with excitement all the time. And they would, the kids would have come, I think, but we had drinking in the lounge in the waiting area, so we couldn't have kids there.
Sure. And I was about
cocktails.
I was about to ask if you, in your personal opinion, feel your kids are old enough to watch Discovery yet.
So my daughter would never. The only episode of any Star Trek my daughter will watch is Rascals from TNG. That's it. So she will not watch any of it, and we have very different taste. And my son, he could watch it. He has not particularly been interested. I actually think he might like some of the shorts. I think he might be more interested in those. But he could, they could watch it. It's just they haven't been particularly interested, which makes me a little bit sad.
Sure.
I might be able to get my husband to watch Picard when it comes, because that was the only Star Trek he kind of liked. He loves Picard and Next Generation. not in the way that he would watch it all, but he would watch some of it. And he did, you know what, I got to give him credit, because when, I'm trying to remember which movie it was, it must have been Nemesis came out. It was the day that we closed on our house and we were moving the next day. And I said, we have to go to the Star Trek movie, even though we just closed on the house and we're moving tomorrow. And so we have to have everything ready. And he said, okay. And we did.
Nice.
So, you know, he's a good husband. So he might be watching Picard. But yeah, the kids have not been interested in Discovery, to my sadness.
Well, Discovery for us was so much fun because it was the first Star Trek that was produced after we were married.
Oh,
so
nice.
It was like, okay, this is something we can literally discover it together and see where the story goes. Neither one of us having experience, neither one of us having any preconceived notions of what's going on, and we both loved it. And then Picard comes along and it's like, okay, now they're going back into the universe we knew, but it's been 20 years, so who knows what's going on there. It's a good time to be a Trek fan. It really is. And to get into it fresh.
Yeah, no, there are all these other new shows coming, and the shorts are coming out, which whether you like, you know, I like some, I don't like some, but it just shows that there's I don't think there's any correct answer to what is Star Trek. And I think it's so many different things, and it's different things to different people. And so all the arguments I hear or see going on about like Discovery or this or that, I mean, you could have that argument about anything. Like there are people who felt that way about the other shows, like Enterprise or Voyager. I mean, to me, Voyager was everything Star Trek was supposed to be, and I love that show. And then to someone else, it wasn't at all, and it was, you know, it was just boring and too high concept that they're, you know, Gilligan's Island in space. So I think I think there's sort of room for all of it, and if people would just stop bickering about it, they could enjoy it more. I mean, I get frustrated as someone who co-runs social media for TrekMovie, and you know, people will do a post. Oh, here it's this person's birthday, and they'll take the opportunity to say crappy things about Discovery.
Yeah, I'm tired of that. Really.
Well, it's like you can say crappy things about Discovery to other people who feel the same way, but don't come to where I am saying positive things and try and poop on it. Like in normal conversation, if someone says to you, "Oh, you know, I love George Clooney," you don't say, "Oh, I hate George Clooney. He's terrible." I mean, I don't think he's terrible, but I like him. But you wouldn't say that to a person who expressed enthusiasm about something. You wouldn't try and poop on it. And so I'm surprised at how willing all these Star Trek fans are to come and do that. But look, there are enough people who love Discovery. Those actors have all been phenomenal ambassadors for the show. They're so invested in it. They're so positive. They're absolutely lovely to deal with every single time. So I think that helps.
It does. It really does. Nothing puts a damper on things than, and you know, there's always been a couple people out there that would, you know, they get really big and they're in something that everybody's talking about, and you find out they're a jerk, and that just becomes, it's the poison pill that kind of follows them throughout their career. And you want to like them, but you know, you probably wouldn't like actually talking to them. And having met a couple of the Discovery people myself, I agree, they are genuinely pleasant, wonderful people to talk to and know.
They are, and they realize that they're lucky to have the jobs that they have, and they realize that they have this huge fandom out there that they can connect with, and I think they've all been great about it. And honestly, like I worked in TV for a long time. I worked at MTV and VH1 and a lot of other networks, and I got to tell you, like a lot of those people are not very nice, and they know how to be nice. They know how to be nice in a PR situation. But they're generally a lot of people, and I don't mean Star Trek people, I just mean in general, actors are trained by the industry they're in to be demanding. It's not that they're all like that from the get-go, but I watched it happen. I watched someone step on camera for the first time and then get encouraged to become a demanding person. And the industry feeds on that, and we create it, and we want those people to feel like they're more special than everybody else. And I have to say that all of these Discovery actors that I've met almost certainly from the first season. I think Michelle Yeoh I didn't meet, and I think I met probably everybody else. They're all warm and friendly and excited. And like the first time we were waiting to get Sonequa Martin Green on the show. She hadn't been on the show yet. We knew she was coming. She came in to the far end of our office, and I was standing there with our writer and our producer, Courtney and Michelle, and Eliza, our AP. And we see her, and we can't help it. We just start like softly clapping because we thought her acting was so great. She sees us and starts softly clapping. We start all walking towards each other. We're all doing this like weird soft clapping. And she came up to us and she said, "I love your show." And we said, "We love your show." And then she said, "Star Trek family." And I feel like everybody was like that. Every single person that that came to us was excited to talk about it, excited that we were fans, and very positive about it. And you go to conventions, and these actors, they all still really like each other from all the other shows. I mean, Jonathan Frakes is a huge part of the franchise still. Mm-hmm. And he came and did stuff with us where he was so giving it 1,000%, so much more than he had to, so invested, asking us a million questions. How many cameras and who's doing this? And what do you do about the rights? And so interested in the whole thing. And so that helps a lot. It helps a lot when it's not just someone who is jaded and frustrated and thinks that they're special.
Mm-hmm. The best way it was ever explained to me was that when, and I'm saying this for the benefit of the audience, you know this already, I'm sure, but you spend so much of your life as an actor being told no, 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 over and over again. You're not worth it. You're not useful. You're not this. You're not that. And then when somebody stops saying no to you and they start saying yes, you're incentivized to make people say yes over and over again. It just becomes your compulsion. And some people never grow out of that.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's true. And you also are suddenly surrounded by people who tell you that your needs are more important than everybody else's. Mm-hmm. And I've seen it because I did, I worked at MTV2 and VH1, and we interviewed all these bands and sometimes actors for things. And the attitudes I saw were terrible because they were surrounded by people telling them, you are more important than other humans. But I never got any of that. I have to say, like, anyone that I've dealt with from Star Trek Discovery cast, especially, of course, but, I've dealt with I've interviewed Kate Mulgrew, and I've met George Takei, and, all these different people, and they're all, thoughtful and invested and have learned how to treat people. And it makes a huge difference.
It really does. And that's to actually get in and talk to somebody, and they just enjoy having the conversation. They're genuinely good people who know their place in the world, and they're grateful for the blessings they have, and they want to share it with the fans that have helped build that. That's the kind of people you want to have on your screen and in your life, if possible.
Absolutely. Like I met Connor Trenier when he did a thing there's a math museum here in New York, and he did the math of Con. So there's a guy, James, I'm going to hate myself for not remembering his name. Very, very smart mathematician who does this great talk about math and Star Trek and which things are true and which things are not. Very entertaining, wonderful guy. And they asked Connor Trenier to introduce him. And so I did a phone interview with Connor before that for TrekMovie. And then I wanted to do something special at the event. And he let my son, who was 13 at the time, do the interview. And he was so warm and funny and just made it so easy for my son. It was it's actually on TrekMovie if you want to find it. But again, like and he has a son, I think a couple of years younger than my son. And just that connection, and they all seem to get it, or most of them seem to get it, and it's great, especially because we look at so many of the, for me, Star Trek original series was my aspiration as a child. So when I've gotten to meet somebody from there, which was, I guess, William Shatner, James Doohan, George Takei, that's it. I've never had a negative experience.
Agreed. Well, we're all about positivity here. We're about creativity. These stories are the best example of that, and I think this might be a good place to leave it. Okay. So before I let you go, because I know you've got stuff to do, you've got a whole full day ahead of you, where can people find you if they want to see more of your writing and hopefully more of your producing down the road?
So on Twitter, I am Flubish. Floobish. I love to talk about TV. I'm a TV fanatic. I love so many shows, and I love writing about TV. And I have a portfolio, which there's a link to there if you ever want to see my latest writing. I think I just put up the first of the Paley Center interviews. I'm on Instagram, also Floobish. And I don't know what TV is going to bring me next, but I always talk about it, so it's easy to find to see what I'm doing.
I will make sure all of that gets put into the show notes so people have easy access to it. Everything's going to be on my website, aaronbossick.com. And this has been a pleasant conversation. I have really enjoyed myself, and I would love to talk to you again anytime.
Me too. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Thanks for having me, and you have yourself a great day, okay?
You too.
Take good care.
Bye.